良心資本主義，良心資本主義，我哋開始啦，好啦，咁啊快啲埋位啦。好啦，咁我哋今日咧就會有2位嘉賓同我哋傾下偈，咁佢哋亦都會有一個幾有趣嘅PowerPoint presentation 嘅。They have very interesting PowerPoint presentation with videos. And first of all, I would also like to thank Fair Trade International to come and join the Social Enterprise Summit. They are going to host a regional conference tomorrow. But today, we will have Mr. Martin Hill, Director of Global Account Management, Fair Trade International, to speak to us about fair trade and also capitalism in a globalized world and the challenges of the international economy. I was talking to Martin 10 minutes ago about, okay, you're working for fair trade. What is fair to you? How do you define fair? And he gave me a very interesting word. He gave me an interesting word about empowerment. So how does empowerment relate to fair trade, and why fairness is related to empowerment? I would like to ask all of you to put your hands together for Mr. Martin Hill. Thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you for such a wonderful introduction, and thank you to the organizers for putting together such a wonderful summit. And more importantly, many, many thanks for inviting me to speak at that summit. It's a wonderful chance for me to speak to you about our fair trade model. I love Hong Kong. I love coming to Hong Kong. I've been coming to Hong Kong more recently because we are starting a very important mission here in Hong Kong for fair trade. And hopefully you'll learn a bit more about that as I speak through this presentation. I got up this morning and I ate my breakfast. And as I was eating my breakfast, I pondered the thought of all of you also getting up this morning and eating your breakfast. And as such, we were all collectively the last part in a very important, complex, and indeed inevitable supply chain, the food supply chain. Now, as the last part in that food chain, I then pondered to think about the first part of that food chain, the producers, the farmers who actually grow the products that go into the products that go into the products that we eat. And that's where the complexity comes in. But here's some bad news. I know that I'm pushing at an open door in here, and obviously people who have come here to this summit have come here because they actually understand many of the things that I'm just about to talk about and want to try and do something about that. But actually in the wider world there's still an awful lot of citizens, and actually those citizens are consumers when it comes to food, who really don't quite get just what this problem is in this food industry, in this food supply chain. I just came back from India. I was in India recently, where we are also launching, as we have launched here in Hong Kong. And I learnt a staggering statistic about farming in India. It's shocking. When I tell you about it, I think you'll be horrified. But the suicide rate among farmers in India is actually at the rate of 2 per hour. So the farmers that are committing suicide are doing so at such a colossal rate. You did hear that right. It actually amounts to, statistically, 2 suicides per hour. I could also tell you about the poverty situation on the planet, and I could also remind us all about the statistics that involve the deaths of children in that situation, poverty-related illnesses. But I won't do that, because that's even more depressing than the statistic I've just shared with you. But all this to say that farming and farmers in general are among the most exploited people on the planet. Most of them are being kept on the poverty line, where they are actually working for very little more than $1 a day in lots of countries, in lots of key core products. All of those core products that go to make the end products that we use in our food supply chain. And many of them as well, shockingly, are what we would call luxury products. So as we sit down to enjoy our bar of chocolate, we have to contemplate the fact that somebody is probably starving as a result of what we're eating, and actually knows very little about what actually became of their product that they grew and where it ended up and how much pleasure it brought for those people that ate it. Okay, bad news over now, because I think, you know, I don't want to be, this presentation was never designed to be depressing, but I felt that it was really good to just provide a backdrop to show some of the issues that we in the fair trade movement are trying to address. And I chose that word carefully, the fair trade movement, because we are a movement, and we are a movement that involves many, many people in many different ways. I want to share some of that with you. But it's interesting, we talk about capitalism and we talk about companies and we talk about how that all comes together and how that permeates. But actually, you know, companies and businesses are around structure and process. Movements are very different. Movements are enablers for flair, creativity, imagination, and flexibility. And yes, it has to be efficient. And yes, there's nothing wrong with the word profit. Actually, there is no shame in profit. Where the shame comes in is in the inequity of the distribution of that profit. Why some in the chain have so much and some in the chain have so little. Just to give you a classic example, I was in the Philippines between India and here, and in the Philippines I had the privilege actually of meeting many vegetable farmers. And I saw a particular vegetable that was grown in the Philippines being sold in one of the major multiple retailers in the Philippines. The farmer received 5 pence for this piece of vegetable, per kilo for this vegetable. The shops were trading it at 36 pence, pesos. So 36 pesos versus 5, you can get an idea of where margins are coming in to the equation, and it's certainly not at the farming end. But the good news, as I say, and this is where we turn it on its head now, and we say that if in the fair trade movement we're doing something about it, and the fair trade movement involves every one of us in this room, potentially. I think as consumers, citizens who are consumers, Richard, I don't know if you're around, but somebody was talking about the fact that we're citizens before we're consumers. Yes, that's absolutely true. And this is a citizens' movement for change. And as I go through this presentation and tell you a little bit about fair trade, I think, or hopefully you'll grasp the fact that we have made this simple for people to actually join in and become a part of. It takes very, very little from the consumer's point of view to play an active part in resolving many of these problems. All you have to do is agree to switch, just one to begin with, one of your purchase choices to fair trade. If you do that, all your friends and family do that, everybody you can multiply the message out to does that, we have got a wonderful solution to a terrible problem. Let me tell you about fair trade. So a bit of a brief introduction, and I will be very brief on the introduction because I have a colleague with me, Andrea Richard, who will give more detail on that tomorrow morning. So if you're around and you're able to see her presentation, you'll get much more detail on the technical details around what Fair Trade Internationalism does. But I'm going to suggest to you in the second part why it's a successful model for the conscientious trade part of our work, and why it is effectively a choice and a consumer choice to make a difference. So our mission and our vision, very simple. You heard my colleague talk about empowerment just now. What we are trying to achieve through this model is an empowerment factor for producers to be able to take control of their lives and live sustainable livelihoods, fulfill their potential, and more importantly, decide their own future. The farmers that I meet, I can actually tell you I've met farmers all around the world. I've been very, very lucky. And they are very shrewd people, but they have some problems. And it's not that there's no solution to these problems, it just takes some funding and it takes a different way of working. So our mission is to connect those disadvantaged, marginalized farmers more closely to the consumer and the consumer more closely to the farmer by providing information and education which enables informed choices, not just for the consumers but for the farmers as well. Because the really bad news is that whilst this has been such an extractive industry, and actually I should know about it, I was 30 years a retailer in the United Kingdom, so I can tell you, retailing is a very extractive industry, but it's easy as well to put stuff back, to try and put something back. And actually, if I think as well around how this all works and how it manifests itself, there is a real opportunity here to promote fairer trading conditions and empower those producers to combat poverty. So I work for Fair Trade International. We are made up of three main pillars. The first one is the producer network. So we have producer networks that work with the producers in three key areas of the world: Asia, Africa, Central Latin America. We have national fair trade organizations in about 23 countries in the world, mainly the market-generating countries, where we work to build up an awareness of the mark, the powerful fair trade mark, which is in the bottom corner of your slide there. And we actually work to effectively get more products, more visibly, more places, more of the time. That's what we do in those market-generating areas. And that comes about as a result of people making choices in favor of fair trade. So if you start saying, I want fair trade products, the retailers will start providing fair trade products. The manufacturers will start manufacturing fair trade products. And in doing so, they have to adhere to a set of rules and conditions that enable farmers to live a sustainable life. And we start off those organizations in the Northern Territories or in the market territories with what we call fair trade marketing organizations. That is what we've started here in Hong Kong. More on that tomorrow. Also, you'll get more detail on how this works, but just very quickly so you can see that the supply chain is taken care of. So right from the producer through to the consumer, we have various stage managed points about how we regulate what's going on in that supply chain. And it's effectively carried through by a certification scheme. And that certification scheme is managed by a team of people called FlowCert. And FlowCert are a wholly owned subsidiary of Fair Trade International, and that's the umbrella organization that I showed you in the last slide. But they're independently accredited so that they're robust and, if you like, autonomous in the sense that they are ISO accredited to ISO 65. Again, I don't want to get too technical. I keep talking about producers and I make no apology for it. The producers are key in what we do. We are effectively farmer up. We are effectively farmer down. So we're driven all the time by taking into consideration what are the benefits for producers and how will they work and what is right for them. We need them to be able to give us information about what they need. It's so important. Otherwise it's patronage and it's philanthropy, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we are about trade, not aid. So we don't effectively aid ourselves out of the problem, we trade ourselves out of the problem. And so therefore, farmers have 50% share ownership in fair trade, 50% voting rights. They are the decision makers, effectively. A quick map there just to show you where we are. The pale blue is where we have the established fair trade organizations, the market-generating organizations. The green areas are the new and emerging markets that we're getting into. And again, I'll leave Andrea to tell you the exciting story about that. But it's very key that we're now getting into key areas where it's south-to-south trading activity. So, you know, if you think about South Africa, where we started trading there quite recently, South Africans are producing produce for South Africans to buy. So it becomes fair trade in a fair trade territory. And then, of course, the green sections here, yellow and orange sections are the new markets that we spoke about. So why is it a good model then? Why is it going to solve our problems? And incidentally, I should say that we never say that this is going to solve all the world's problems. We're not perfect. We know we're not perfect. I was a retailer 30 years. I've chosen to spend the last 8 years with fair trade because I haven't seen anybody do anything better. I think this organization does it better. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I truly believe that. And why? Because some of the things I'm about to share with you are actually, they're certified, they're guaranteed. When you buy a product with a fair trade label on, you know it's not discretionary that these things are happening, it's mandatory. So if you like, we have a kind of, one might say, compliance factor. But where we try to encourage organizations to be is moving away from compliance and into commitment. But we'll go into more on that in a minute. So Fair Trade International is managed by a not-for-profit organization, but working with businesses. I've already mentioned our vision is about improving farmers' lives. Farmers actually own the organization. They always focus on fair trade decisions, and obviously with the fair trade retail and trade, consumers get a chance to change trade. I've already covered that. But this is the real important, these are the important factors. These are the unique things that fair trade bring to the supply chain. We actually provide producers with a fair trade minimum price, FMP. It means that through the way we've organized our structure and organized our control of that side of the food chain, producers are never asked to sell products for less than they can reasonably be sustainable at. So they will never be forced to sell products below the cost of production. And if you look at some of the supply chains in the world, particularly coffee is a classic example, cocoa is another one, you'll see the volatility in the price change, in the price movements of those key commodities in the ordinary stock markets shows you that many times that price dips below what is sustainable. With fair trade, that cannot happen. So anyone who works with us has to agree to pay the minimum price. They also have to agree to pay a premium on top of that minimum price. So we're actually not just creating a situation where lives are improved today, we're actually creating a situation where there's more hope for a better future. Because what's happening is those farmers are then investing that premium, not just in the basic needs and moving themselves out of a poverty-stricken situation, but they're actually then investing in the future of their products. Many of the issues that we have in this world, particularly where there's disease in crops, etc., crop failures, it all comes because of lack of investment. And these producers cannot afford to invest properly in those crops because all they can do is barely survive. So it's quite important that this fair trade minimum premium price is enabling them to invest. And actually, sorry guys, but it's the women in those groups that have the best investment decisions. And they actually recognize that when they invest in quality, crop yield enhancement, extension services, they're not only securing a better sustainable supply chain, but they're actually creating, if you like, a multiplication of the money that they're investing, because crop yields means you get more product from the same piece of land, and that is real farmer income. And so we're, if you like, effectively giving them an opportunity to get themselves into a situation where they generate their own farmer income. We create situations where they have pre-finance and access to financing those increasing markets. We provide producer support through our producer and services related departments. And we provide, as I've already mentioned, information and training to enable them to actually improve the way they work and the connections they have with the companies and the kind of companies that are attracted to buy from them. I mean, I remember when I came into fair trade 8 years ago, you could only really buy fair trade coffee at church fetes and sort of pretty much niche retail environments. Now we've hit the mainstream because the quality has improved, and now there is more attraction for those products coming from smaller, marginalized, disadvantaged farmers, because our work focuses on small farmers in getting them organized, getting them actually in a place where they can trade effectively and have market access. And of course, where we work with plantations, then the same applies to making sure that the workers are getting a fair price and that they are being properly treated. So our work doesn't just work around small farmers, it works around workers as well. Just a quick few stats to just show you where we've come to, actually, from small beginnings and where we're actually starting to get a force to reckon with now. And actually, governments are recognizing we're a force to reckon with. We are working with about 1.3 million farmers in 70 countries. We paid our estimate in 2012 about 80 million premium through the products that got sold. And we're working with about 1,150 producer organizations, which is 16% up on the year before. So the whole thing is kind of, success is fostering success. How is the premium being spent? Well, it's interesting, actually. I could go on all afternoon about some of the work that's been done with premium and how lives have been improved. I've just given you a couple of examples just to bring it to life and make it real. Producers in India have actually not just built a school, but they've actually been able to now to afford and fund a teacher that turns up every day. As basic as that sounds, that's how basic it is often. It's not just building a school and getting the appropriateness around that school, it's actually being able to afford the teachers who will turn up every day. Plantation workers receiving proper housing conditions to live in. The picture you see there is a group effort of spent premium funds to create housing for workers, in this particular example in Sri Lanka, but it happens in many places around the world. And of course, water, the use of water, irrigation, and indeed pumping stations and methodology is all made possible with money, and money comes from being able to invest from the premiums that they receive. So why is it a choice for retailers? What's in it for them? And I mentioned before that there's no shame in profit. Profit is what capitalism is all about, and without it, there would be no attraction, and it becomes a downward spiral. It's about how that profitability is managed and how equitable it is distributed. Equitably, it's distributed. The fair trade mark has become the most widely recognized mark. In many countries, it's running at 85–90% awareness. So when we have this, this mark independently verified, we found that not only do the largest percentage of consuming population recognize it, but a similarly high percentage actually support it and regularly buy it. And even if you can't, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, even if you cannot afford to actually change all of your purchases to fair trade, just one or two makes a big difference. It supports their CSR policies, and it actually creates a strong USP. And by that, I mean their ability to get value from values and be values-led. That means a lot. There are a lot of organizations now that have leaders who have recognized that if they don't do something quickly, they are not going to have a supply chain to actually service their products and their accounts with in 10, 20, 30, 50 years' time. So they've woken up to the idea that they really need to move, and they need to move quickly, and they need to make sure that people are understanding in which direction they're going and for what reason they're going in that direction. That's all good news for farmers. 4.8 billion spent on fair trade products in 2012. Over 125 countries have been selling fair trade products. All this from very small beginnings. It just goes to show how welcoming the world is becoming at now recognizing what fair trade is and what good it can do. Those are the overall growth rates, but in some countries it's actually double-digit sales increases, doubling effectively every 2 years. That's the power and strength of the sales performance in these territories. I won't dwell on this one, it just gives you an idea of which countries are doing what and how those numbers are improving. But I will just draw your attention to South Africa, because I mentioned that as being one of our first south-to-south activities. And look at the growth rate, 220%. That's because Cadbury's Dairy Milk moved into to support South Africa and the project they were doing. And it just goes to show that if we get one or two mainstream businesses to support the many smaller businesses who are buying into fair trade, then it becomes scalable, because it becomes reachable through many, many distribution points to many, many people. And again, this slide is just designed to show you a little bit about Asia, but it just gives a clue what happens when we create a fair trade marketing organization in a given country. Look at the slice of the cake that Hong Kong has got already. And this particular Hong Kong fair trade marketing organization has only been working for about a year in its current format. Although there's been fair trade in Hong Kong through cross-border sales, we've only had a recognized office here for about the last year. That just shows, this is a slide to show where our products are. So, you know, my role in Germany, where I'm based, is to look after the 7 key category products and drive the success of those products through the companies and the territories in which we work. And you'll see that tea, coffee, flowers, sugar, cocoa, cotton, and bananas are the main category sales. Just a quick one to show you some of the companies that have been working with us around the world. Some of those are very, very serious players, very big players, but they've all committed to work to the fair trade principles. It isn't just greenwashing, they've all converted considerably important products. I mean, if you look at Kit Kat, some of you will think, well, that's strange, they're working with Nestle, but actually, Nestle is a company that is headed up by leaders, and it's the leaders who are making the change. Whoever and whatever company has done whatever they've done in the past, I believe everybody should have a chance to change. If people want to change their behavior and recognize that their behavior needs to change, then I think we should let them. And Kit Kat is indeed the world's #1 snack bar. So, you know, that was no small commitment by that company to start working properly with fair trade. Just this one to show that in the United Kingdom, for example, but there are many more in many countries, Sainsbury's is one of the largest retailers, and they made absolute solid commitments to get value from values. by converting the whole of their entire banana supply chain. You cannot buy a banana in the United Kingdom in a Sainsbury's store unless it's a fair trade one. And importantly, the other major retailers started converting theirs as well, because once one does it, everybody wants to do it. So we now have the Co-op, we now have Waitrose. They're all starting to convert all of their bananas to fair trade. That will make life-changing differences to farmer producers. They have about 50%, 57% market share, I think it is, in Switzerland. That's a serious market share. People keep saying to me, fair trade's only small though. And yes, it is. We have a lot to do. But let's remind ourselves, 57% is a huge market share. Plenty of people in business would be very happy with a market share like that. Those are the biggest companies that we work with, but it's not just about the big companies. Many of the smaller organizations that started off in a very committed way, not just a compliant way, in a very committed way, have driven these businesses to actually support fair trade. So everybody has a massive role to play in this. Just a couple of examples. There's Ben & Jerry's, what they're doing, and indeed they are international and they really want to get stronger in Asia, so that's exciting. And there, just to mention, Cadbury's Dairy Milk is Britain's favorite chocolate bar, but it also is in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, South Africa. They've converted their products in all of those countries, so much so that in the United Kingdom, that one product alone reached 30,000 distribution points. And more importantly, gave $4 million to producers of cocoa in premiums, $3.5 million of premiums to sugar producers. It's amazing how much sugar there is in some of these products. Perhaps I shouldn't tell you that. So there's our mark. It works in two ways. The bottom picture is the mark you'll see on products that carry the Fair Trade certification mark. So you know you can purchase those products, absolutely guaranteed that the farmer is being paid properly. And the top mark is the one that we use for marketing purposes. So you'll see that hopefully as a symbol of support for fair trade in many other ways, bags, T-shirts, fronts of shop fronting. Because we work in so many different ways with so many different organizations, it's good to have a themed approach to a simple, recognizable mark. That has been our success. Told you that one already. These are the products that we are in. Now, it's interesting that when fair trade started in the United Kingdom, for example, it was about 1994, there were 4 products, 3 people working on them. Now, they have 5,500 products, SKUs of products. That's a considerable movement in that short space of time for anyone who's in that kind of trade. And I think that really brings me to the end of the presentation, because you'll get more technical details tomorrow. But I just want to finish by saying that it's never over. Fair trade is a journey. I would like to know if you'll all join us on that journey. I'm sure you will. I think you're in this room because you are interested enough and you care. But can you get all your friends, all your relatives, all the people you have in contact with? Every time you tell someone, that person will tell 2 or 3 more, that person will tell 2 or 3 more. It multiplies up. Our grassroots movement that has driven a lot of the success of fair trade started with just a handful of people. Now thousands of people talk about fair trade. And if you really still have doubts that you switching one of your products that you buy to fair trade will make a difference, let me leave you with this thought. Many, many raindrops falling in the mountains make the mighty rivers flow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Next, we will have our last speaker for day 1, and then we will have a Q&A section for today. And before I forget, please remember to return your headset for the simultaneous interpret machines to the desk over there, and we will need you to return this today. Tomorrow, we will not be hosting the event in Hall 5G. We will have a very early start on Saturday, and we will have all the breakout sessions on the 2nd floor, from room 221 to room 230. We will have one integrated session, which 2 universities will debate, and also we'll have Dr. Charles Hampden Turner and also David Bornstein, who is on the plane right now, to talk about dilemma reconciliation. and also solutions journalism. Okay, now please welcome Dr. Murray Mackay, Director of Society and Development, Cultural and Education Section of the British Embassy. Doctor.
Well, thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I'm also very delighted to be here today on behalf of the British Council. I also, like Martin, very much enjoy coming to Hong Kong, and particularly at this time of year when it's very, very cold in Beijing, which is where I'm based, so it's nice to come and to feel some warmth amongst all of you. So I'm going to talk to you in two parts today. I'm going to begin briefly by sharing a few reflections about conscientious capitalism and the kind of things that I spend quite a lot of time thinking about as we do the work that we do with the British Council and with social entrepreneurs. And then I'm going to magically move from the stage onto the screen and share in a bit more detail the programme that we run and have been running across East Asia for the past 5 years. So the British Council has been working with social entrepreneurs across East Asia since 2009. And I think for all of us, 2009 was a year of reckoning as we came to terms with the impact of the financial crisis that was being felt all across the world. And it became impossible, really, at that point for even the mainstream to maintain an unquestioning faith in the Wall Street model of shareholder-driven capitalism. So the crisis did provide all of us with an opportunity for change, and I think it's fair to say that since that point we've witnessed the emergence of a much more global social enterprise movement. However, everybody is here today because we know there is still a long way to go before the dreams and aspirations we have for a fairer and more inclusive world to be realised. So what kind of things do we need to pay attention to? There's three things that I just want to mention briefly today, which, as I say, are things which I spend quite a lot of time considering. And the first is that I think we need to collaborate, really collaborate, in order to bring about the kind of change that we want to see. If competitive economics, or capitalism as we know it, is about competing for resources and markets, then perhaps we can think about conscientious capitalism as collaborating for impact. In my view, competitive economics and collaborative economics are not the same thing. They can coexist and they can feed off one another, but the kind of leverage and sustainability that Martin has just been describing through the fair trade model that comes from really deep and thoughtful collaboration demands different priorities. It requires us to think about new platforms and to facilitate new dialogues that allow economies of scale to emerge that really can be truly transformational. The kinds of things that support and speed up the convergence that we are seeing across the corporate, financial, philanthropic and development sectors, so that a different kind of economy emerges that better serves the needs of this planet and its people. So there's no doubt that we are making progress and that there is a maturing social enterprise movement which is supporting this much wider growing business consciousness and bringing forward many innovations, whether they are innovations to develop or to incubate or to invest or to measure social entrepreneurship in many different contexts and many different markets. And many of you in the room today will be leading those kinds of innovations. However, one observation perhaps is that if either by design or by default, we begin to default to a model of competition with these innovations, then we may miss the point. So I think it's very important that we focus on co-creation and trust that will allow us to develop the kinds of ecosystems that we need to harvest the sort of scale and synergies from the situations that we can, which would otherwise demand us to make trade-offs and to minimize the social impact that we could see otherwise. So the second point for me then is that we need to start to treat much more seriously the idea of social capital. One of the key challenges, I think, of the idea of conscientious capitalism is to take collective responsibility for addressing the gaps and raising the bar in our economic systems. But in order to do that, we really have to start placing a much higher value on social capital and how we trade in social capital. And by social capital, I mean broadly the web of non-financial resources like trust and partnership and shared values that connect our societies and make our communities better places to live. Social capital can be managed and leveraged for real returns, and I think we will see it emerge as the primary currency for conscientious capitalism over the next 10 or so years, maybe sooner. I'm increasingly convinced that financial capital follows social capital and not the other way around. And if we start to believe that en masse and to act accordingly, I think we will be able to leverage many more resources, whether they are financial or otherwise, into the development of healthy and inclusive societies. So how we do that is obviously a challenge. Events like this, for example, produce a huge amount of social capital, and it reminds us that we're all working together towards a set of common purposes. But it's very easy to revert back to our own organisations and our own immediate priorities. And we need to tap into the kind of energy and solidarity that's here today and to use that to make progress. And so the final point for me is that it really does need to be all about people. I had the privilege a few months ago at the IIX Investing and Inclusion Conference in June to listen to Professor Yunus. And one of the many powerful things that I heard him say was that there's nothing wrong with human beings. It's the system that's broken. And I think it's time that people and the concept of citizenship becomes much more central to the way that we actively think and talk about economic development and business. So the idea that economics and business are objective systems and theories that need to be applied is no longer enough. It needs to become much more personal. Capitalism can only be conscientious when each of us are conscientious about making primary what needs to be primary, and that is people. And one of the best ways I think we can do that is through our collective impact stories. Everybody in the room today either believes things can be better or wishes things could be better. And perhaps if we can start to tell more collective and stronger impact stories about what really matters, then we will be able to make that happen. So I'm going to close my general reflections now and ask for the video to be played. And this is the debut of this video, by the way. We've not shown it in public before, so you are our first official viewers.
This is Tatik. She developed an organic farming business supporting women in her community. Chris Humelon and Oliver Maneha run a social enterprise that sells hand-woven bags made from natural fibres. And this is Huanca, who developed a really successful rooftop gardening business in Shanghai. A significant shift is taking place. People from all walks of life, from governments to communities, are recognising that social enterprises can make our world a better place. Social enterprises take business approaches to tackle social problems. They are real businesses that generate real jobs, but instead of generating profits for owners, they invest their profits for impact and help to create more sustainable societies. Every day, thousands of social entrepreneurs across Asia are working for a better future, and the British Council is helping them. Our unique position means we can provide training and help with securing investment. All this so they can build successful businesses and improve their communities, starting at the grassroots. Since 2009, our social enterprise programme has harnessed UK expertise to support this new generation of innovators. We've trained more than 2,700 entrepreneurs and reached almost 200 million people across Asia.
The history of social enterprise in the UK can be plotted back to probably 150 years or so, but certainly there's been an explosion of startups over the last 20 years, and I think the term social enterprise has become part of everyday language. We've got 70,000 social enterprises operating in the UK. I think this is the future of business, not only within our communities and villages and towns, but actually right around the world. The social enterprise is helping the government to achieve its own vision, a sustainable, fair and inclusive society.
There are some real innovations in the UK social investment market. First of those is Big Society Capital, the world's first social investment bank, but also new products, things such as the social impact bond, which there are more in the UK than the rest of the world put together. The UK has a great opportunity to promote the global social investment market. We've got a lot of learnings here that we can share, and that allows us to learn from other countries as well.
Returning to East Asia, we can see why social enterprise is so relevant to this diverse region. We have also built a strong community of partners, governments, foundations, NGOs, universities and multinationals. In Indonesia, together with partner the Arthur Guinness Fund, we helped cooperatives such as Wana Lestari Menore. By working together, they receive better prices for the trees they log, allowing them to reinvest in planting new trees and ensure a greener and wealthier future. In the Philippines, with our partner Starbucks, we support social enterprises like SeedCorps, which helps farmers earn higher incomes and reduce deforestation by planting cacao trees. We also influence policy by convening dialogue with government and investors. They are keen to learn from UK experience as they introduce policies that support this growing sector. In Myanmar, we are helping organisations like FXB, who work with trafficked women.
Nowadays, FXB Myanmar is sustaining on its own resources. Social enterprise is very important because it involves empowering the community members.
One of the major challenges of the NGOs is the difficulty of sustaining itself. We would have to educate the NGOs to turn themselves from a donor-driven, donor-dependent entities into independent, self-sustaining. I would like really to congratulate British Council for taking the lead on supporting social enterprise.
The innovators we support tackle some of the biggest challenges in the region, like ageing populations. Wei Xingjiang, who is 81 years old, receives care from a social enterprise called Golden Sun.
老人家现在最需要的就是一种就是老了有看病，一种就是老了有孤寡的，就是做卫生、买菜。刚才这个洗衣服，就是这个最关键的。
金太阳是专门为老人提供养老服务的一个养老机构，目前主要是以居家养老为主，就是上门去为老人提供养老院的服务。
金太阳呢，就是有救，我们有事情打个电话给他们就来了。晚上有事情，我打电话，他们也可以来。
时间上，我们现在给老人的承诺是力争15分钟到家。
对，目前已经。
我们先要把老人的资料建立档案，然后他在家里需要帮助或需要服务的时候，只要按下一个呼叫键，那我们中心平台就会马上做出响应，根据他的需求，我们就派出服务。英国文化协会办的社会企业家技能培训，应该对我 个人来讲，和对我们整个金太阳机构来说，起到了一个决定性的作用。因为我是抱着一个很茫茫的心态去参加这个培训的，知道有一个很好的商业模式，但只是说知道，不懂得怎么做，而且没有信心。参加培训之后，更清晰了自己的企业的一个愿景。那在培训的时候，我们是没有一个居家养老服务站，现在我们已经有将近100个居家养老服务站，而且 服务的受众群体已经达到了将近20万。 现在我们已经有了4家的战略合作伙伴，这也是源于我培训当中所学到的，要懂得借力使力。
Huang Xiaorong's success in helping her community and creating more than 100 jobs shows just how powerful social enterprise can be. And as our programme grows, we are teaming up with more and more partners who see that social enterprise and ethical investment can transform millions of lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mackay. Just a kind reminder, if you can find our questionnaire in your bag and fill it in and give it back to our staff over there, will be deeply appreciated. 收問卷咧，從來都係咧所有搞 conference 最難做嘅嘢，咁所以我哋希望大家可以幫我哋即係填寫翻呢份問卷，覆翻我哋。Please fill in the questionnaire for the Social Enterprise Summit and return to our staff over there. Thank you. All right. May I now invite Dr. Luk？ 我想而家請阿陸銀龍博士啊，one of the founders of the Social Enterprise Summit and also the mastermind behind the 我們可以改變世界系列to come out on stage and share with us his reflection for today. Dr. Luk, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Luk.
Thank you, Vincent. I know that everybody is pretty tired after this long day, so I should make it short and hopefully useful as a reminder for what we have actually gone through for today. So let me go directly into the subjects. I suppose in the morning we concentrated quite a bit on policy, and that has a lot to do with the role of the government, especially because our Chief Secretary, Carrie Lam, came here and had a dialogue with Jane. It is obvious that also from the other speakers in the morning, speaking for the experiences, talking about experiences of Boston, Australia, Singapore, and the UK, and all the same, that government certainly has a role to play. And Carrot Lam has mentioned 3 things in particular, that as an advocate, as a facilitator, as a funder. Rosemary has actually gone beyond that. She talks about the convener, a connector, a knowledge breaker, and of course, Charles has taken into a lot of thinking about how we can explore many strategies that the government can do. I will not go into details of that, and that is how to make the government a better enabler, a market maker. This is quoting his words. So there's a lot for us to think about what really the government can do for us. And certainly from all the speeches and dialogue, we could see that the government's role will be limited. Carrot Lam honestly say that the government has certain inertia, certain fear, certain rigidity, and so on, but she advises not to give up, so we should try. And we can also recognize that the governments are moving everywhere, including Hong Kong. And this morning, we should be very glad to know that actually officials, a fair number of officials for the first time came to our symposium, several dozens. And in fact, they are from many different government branches. We could see that the government is really thinking of doing something, a more coordinated kind of policy, some change to the structures and regulations to play a bigger role. But our Chief Secretary also, as a response to Charles' suggestions that something might be easier than others. Some of the things perhaps cannot be done in Hong Kong. And we should in fact ask after this symposium, is that the case? Why? Can we actually help the government to move forward so that many of the suggestions that are proposed today can be further considered and therefore carried out in the future? So the big question here is that what the government should do and how we are going to deal with the government. There were suggestions from Carrie herself that maybe we should do something small, experiment, demonstrate that it is workable, and therefore the government can come in. Penny Low has suggested that perhaps we should think from the other side. Although we want the government to learn how to work with the people, maybe we should also learn how to work with the government. So we frame the issues in a kind of mindset and strategies, and they will make it easier. So there were some of the ideas of this morning. And the big basic question is, of course, what actually the government should do and what we would want it to help. Having said all this about the government, the focus, in fact, of the social enterprise movement is in fact that it is a citizens movement. And it is quite clear from the first speech, actually by Nigel, and repeated again by the other speakers like Rosemary and so on. The concepts of the urban mechanics, civic innovation, that how we should, in fact, therefore involve everybody, and the key notion that nothing can really be meaningful and can be done and can be achieved unless the solutions are found and created by the people themselves. And perhaps I can use those words that they should be from the people, by the people, for the people, to the people. Okay, so that is what actually we need to do. And therefore, we are putting the responsibility back to ourselves, everybody of the city, of the country. We have been told that perhaps we should do something small, and with the burning desire, I'm actually quoting some of the speakers' words, a person can do something. And we were asked, of course, by the Chief Secretary that we can experiment. But at the same time, we also heard that it is important to scale up. It is important to have a critical mass. So how can we do it actually from the individual, from the small deeds, to transform it something to be of a scale that it can make a bigger impact on society, then that would require us to think further and deeper. And we would need to really find out very specifically the practicable, workable solutions, formulas. And perhaps, as I could figure out from some of the ideas this morning, not so well elaborated because of the lack of time, that there are many community-based activities, which of course would put people in a community together, but among all different communities, there are common issues. And it is where, if we can find the formulas and the specific solutions, that we would have the change makers and the people to connect them, and therefore have the government to find out ways to help to facilitate. So the interesting here is that it has to be really from the people. But then at one point, we make sure that the government can come in, that we can scale up small things into bigger movements. And perhaps we can therefore create the ecosystem, new ecosystem that we need. We have come to the point, of course, of the role of every sector in society, and this afternoon we have several sessions on that. In particular, we pay a lot of attention to the business sector, and we had a business lunch. We involved quite a lot of business people, and of course, the present sort of dominating ecosystem is the market economy and capitalism. This is the backbone. The business people is the backbone of the market. And there were two key notions, in my view, from this morning's discussion and the business lunch. One is that the business has to go beyond CSR. Not that CSR is wrong, it is good, but it has to go beyond CSR. Second, capitalism is not always doing good for everybody, as we all know, and especially perhaps under the forces of globalization. And Rosemary mentioned that we should not actually ignore the forces of the global forces. We have to recognize it and take care of it. And therefore, we understand that capitalism is not working well in all directions. It's actually not working well to itself. The business people will find that it is not easy to do good business nowadays. And therefore, the key notion is that we have to find a way so that capitalism can work when it is, and it has become also socially sustainable. And that comes into our last session, I believe, the way of building up a new ecosystem, a better kind of a system, of economic system. We have heard Martin talk about, through the case of fair trade, the consumer's power. So this is us, everybody who can help. It is also the big brand names which come into line and help to make, therefore, the whole trading system a fairer one. I am encouraged very much, actually, by Myri Mackay, who mentioned one thing, and I believe in her, that if we concentrate to work out bigger, better social capital for ourselves, and then finance capital will follow. It is not that people have gone wrong, but rather the systems have problems, and it is for us to fix the systems. And fundamentally, when we talk about conscientious capitalism, when we talk about collaboration, cross-sector, joint efforts, government and community collaboration to try to find solutions, new solutions to our problems, it is actually all out of our conscience, our heart, and the ethics of good. So all efforts have to be for good, and all innovations have to be for good. Thank you.
Dr. Luke 請留步。好啦，要勞煩你咧，將啲 good goods 送俾我哋兩位嘉賓。好啦，咁啊 ，May I now invite Mr. Hugh and Dr. Mackay to come on stage, and we have a small souvenirs from Hong Kong for you. Thank you very much for sharing today. It's photo time. I have props for you. Can I ask the three speakers on stage to take a seat, and we'll have a very quick Q&A. Thank you very much for your recap, Dr. Lok. Please have a seat. We need your brain, and we need your brain power, especially I think we are quite low in blood sugar right now. All right, any questions for our speakers here? Do you agree with the recap? Do you have anything to add? I think it's a good recap over there too as well. Any quick questions? Mr. Hugh, Dr. Mackay, after listening to Dr. Lok's summary, any further thought, last word for today, in order to open up our discussion for tomorrow? Tomorrow we'll have a very different discussion. We'll break into many different groups. Fairtrade is going to have the regional conference, but we'll also have skills-based training, policy panel in the morning on 4 specific policy areas: aging, which we touch on in the video as well, environment, poverty alleviation, and also education. And we also have measurements, impact measurements, discussions, and all that, more practical discussion tomorrow. Anything to add on top of what Dr. Look has just said, Mr. Hu?
Well, I think it was a very good summary, and I think I would just echo the fact that we are all the masters of our own destiny. And if we want change, we will make it happen. We will get what we want, and we will get what we deserve.
Doctor?
I think during the sessions tomorrow where people get more specific about whether it's investment or incubation or understanding impact, it is important to bear in mind some of the bigger points or the points that keep emerging through the discussions today, because the key really is to look at how there is a supply chain across all of those things, and that we keep an eye to that supply chain, and talk to people that you've not spoken to so that you can identify opportunities to really try and develop the collaboration from the event that's taking place. Because I think, you know, we all think that creating new systems and collaborating is difficult, but often it can be a lot easier than we think it is if we have conversations that are out of the box.
Well, let me ask a question like this. When I look at your case studies, I can't stop thinking about Hong Kong. And there's some social enterprises, some models are applicable all around the world. Say, for example, the phone services for the elderly. I think it's a very famous service. One of the pioneer of social enterprises in Hong Kong as well. When you travel around the world and see so many types of social innovations, so many models, so many entrepreneurs, what are the commonalities among these social entrepreneurs around the world? And what is specific for Hong Kong that Hong Kong can play a different role or play a unique role in promoting social innovation for the world? I mean, your views?
I'm not sure.
It's a selfish question. I mean,
okay.
we are asking, why is Hong Kong so special and what can we do more?
Well, I think one of the things that is common to social entrepreneurs all across the world is that, you know, they are deeply committed to doing things that address problems in their own communities or issues that are close to their hearts. I think one of the big opportunities at the moment is that a more global movement is providing an opportunity for an exchange of conversation where a sector that has up until now been really quite grassroots, so by definition it is about people trying to address issues in their own communities. And once we open up that dialogue more and allow people to begin to understand opportunities to exchange knowledge, to see where there are similar issues being addressed in other markets, either in similar ways or in different ways, and that's very exciting in terms of knowledge exchange and encouragement and being able to identify opportunities to scale. But it's also exciting for the whole concept of the internationalizing a sector that has largely been, by definition, quite country-based.
Well, I have the pleasure to work with both the British Council Hong Kong office and the China office for this conference. How do you see the roles of these two offices in helping social innovation? I mean, I think they work seamlessly, but from the director point of view, how do you see the two offices?
We do a number of different things. So we are working in perhaps sort of 3 or 4 main areas. One is around capacity building for social entrepreneurs in the different markets that we operate. One is around engaging at the sort of policy level and particularly engaging UK expertise in that discussion and connecting that across markets, because as I said, that makes a big difference. And then the other area that we are now starting to work very closely and more in is the area of social investment and how we can then create that supply chain. So we have, one of the things that we've really realized is that having access to so many different social entrepreneurs right across East Asia and beyond that now is a huge asset and a huge pool for many, many social investors and organizations who increasingly want to do good things and make good investments. And we can help to make those connections.
Thank you. Martin, why are you bringing the conference to Hong Kong this year for Fair Trade?
Well, I think it certainly traps for us a lot of hard work that's been done by just a handful of people over the years in Hong Kong to get it to the point where it's clear that we can actually make the most of what is a definite swathe in an opinion change from consumers. People are showing that they are more and more ready to accept that they want to know more. Consumers, customers, citizens are becoming more discerning. They're asking many, many more questions about the supply chain of the food that they are eating day in and day out. And I think, you know, it's important that people are given the opportunity to know more about the food they are eating every day. And when they understand it more clearly, they start making better informed decisions, and that puts pressure on everybody to be a part of the solution.
I agree. And in Hong Kong, we just love to eat, don't we?
And you have very good food, I can vouch for that.
Don't we? All right, don't we? Dr. Luk, your last word of wisdom?
I think I have some thoughts about Hong Kong since you asked this question. Okay. Two sides. On the one hand, in fact, Hong Kong should be a good place for innovations and social enterprises. Actually, one strong thing about Hong Kong is, of course, it is not lacking in resources. Now, like I have seen the other cases of social innovation or whatever in some other places, some other cities where the city is actually broken in many senses. That happens in many places of the world, even America, okay, and so on. But we are not lacking in resources. It's a pretty open society whereby we can bring in, there's good flow of information, knowledge. People are generally quite well educated. So we should not fear, and we should believe in ourselves that we can actually find solutions more easily than many other places in the world. But on the other hand, I would say, I mentioned what Rosemary has mentioned, the global forces, okay, which has made, in fact, capitalism itself partly broken too. And many of the problems that we have nowadays, including the widening gap of the rich and the poor, that while we grow, but fewer people are benefiting from growth and so on, it's because of globalization, because of the competition, the competitive economics that is still very much at play in our world, in our system. And Hong Kong is a very open economy, highly competitive. And therefore, some of these negative forces are also very strong at work here in Hong Kong. And that makes sometimes solutions not easy, okay? And other approaches to things not easy, including our business people. So I think we should also recognize it. And therefore, it's up to us to really think about how we can find a way out, okay? Between these two, the strong points and the negative factors. But one last thing from me, perhaps, and that is advertising for tomorrow. I will go back to Nigel's speech this morning when he said that the issues that we tackle, the formulas, the solutions have to be relevant. You have to be user by user experience, and with that we should build up the trust, okay? And tomorrow's sessions, we are really trying to address the issues that matters, okay? This afternoon, the breakout sessions are really about the different sectors. So to talk about, with their own strengths and their own particular position in society, what the different sectors should do. Tomorrow, we're addressing all these issues of poverty, aging, you know, and so on, so they are relevant. And this is where I believe we should focus on the real solutions and formulas, even if the small ones, medium ones, big ones, whatever. And from that point onward, we can formulate perhaps more ideas, innovative ideas for future action.
Thank you, Dr. Luk. Thank you, Dr. McKee, and thank you, Mr. Hugh. Let's put a big hand for our three speakers today. And you can help us to make the social innovation wind blows. All right? And 好啦，我哋最後啦，真係多謝幾位。 麻煩工作人員可以搬走張台凳啦。有幾樣嘢提一提大家嘅，記得還翻部機啦。Please return the SI machines. Also, I just received a new report from Engage Hong Kong。啱啱你哋可能有人睇到 Engage Hong Kong 有本英文嘅 report 嘅，咁但係佢哋原來中文版都啱啱印起咗辣手嘅呢本嘢嚇，咁咧就可以喺門口度攞免費嘅呢本唔使買㗎，呢本可以攞出去嘅。咁啊，如果買書嘅話咧，我哋嘅 counter 係會擺到6:3度啦，咁啊大家要爭取時間買書啦。好，咁啊最後，我哋想今日請我哋完結之前我哋由唱歌開始，都想由唱歌結束啦。我哋就有首主題曲嘅，唱我哋首主題曲嘅咧就係鍾氏兄弟。Let's welcome the Chong's brother. Woo! All right. Okay, what are you going to sing for us? 唱咩歌今日
？We'll be singing the theme song of Social Enterprise, written by us. It's called With Our Own Two Hands because we truly believe that if we want to make a change to the world, we have to start from ourselves. And if everyone is thinking